time to take a look at what the Space Wolves have coming in Saga of the Beast. We've got doctrines, a chaplain listening, stratagems and more, so let's take a look at what Games Workshop have deigned to share with us. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy focused 40k channel where we're all about getting the most out of our miniatures on the tabletop. So the Warhammer community site preview is up for Saga of the Beast Space Wolves, giving us a pretty idea of what the Sons of Fenris will be getting in the new book. In summary, they've given us a new doctrine, a bunch of new stratagems, 3 of them having been shown off, access to chaplain listeners and 1 unique Space Wolves one, and also some new relics of the Fang as well. They've included some previews for Ragnar Blackmane, but we'll have a video out for him in a few hours time, so I'll save talking about him for there. There's a fair bit to cover, so let's jump right into it. So first off, we know that the Space Wolves are getting combat doctrines. I strongly suspect that this book will have already gone to print before any of the new errata that the Space Marines got recently came into effect, so I'm sure they'll have to correct it to mean that the doctrines automatically cycle through now, rather than just being able to stay in Devastator Doctrine all game. It's not really too bad a thing for the Space Wolves though, as in general they'll probably be wanting to get into Savage Fury, their new assault-based doctrine, as soon as they possibly can. Savage Fury is a flat, uncomplicated buff to close combat melee strength. Basically, while this doctrine is active, as well as the standard extra AP that you get for being in the assault doctrine, when you make an unmodified roll of 6 to hit with a melee weapon, it scores an additional hit on the same target. It's possibly not the most interesting doctrine we've seen out of any of them. It is essentially just flat increase in melee damage, but I do like the way that it's absolutely universal, and you don't even have to charge to make it take effect, like some other ones such as White Scars or Black Templars do. On your standard Space Marine hitting on 3s, this is the equivalent to a 25% combat damage increase, although with Space Wolves, as they're often going to be hitting on 2s, it's going to be more like 20% over what they would normally get. It'll actually be the biggest relative damage increase on things like Power Fists and Thunderhammers that have a -1 to hit penalty, due to more of your hits being 6s. Thunderhammers and Power Fists are going to be particularly scary with this up, and also the standard Space Wolves chapter trait. Compared with the others, I would say it's flatly better than Black Templars in pretty much all scenarios. White Scars are slightly better when they're charging vehicles or other multi-wound targets, but theirs is useless against combat against 1-wound infantry and things, so it's not exactly ideal. And compared with Blood Angels, it's going to be worse on multi-model units of Space Wolves charging. This will be better for their characters with a high number of attacks, so I guess it's sort of doubling down on the hero thing that Space Wolves have going. Obviously, as an assault doctrine, it's going to take a while to get there. You're only going to be able to access it by turn 3, which does sort of limit its usefulness in the game, but a decent, strong universal buff to close combat certainly doesn't go amiss. In any case, the extra AP from combat doctrines will certainly be a boost to a Space Wolves as an army as a whole, and it's good to have them brought in line with the other major first founding chapters. Next up, we have 24 new stratagems, of which we know 3 of the new Space Wolves ones. A lot of these will be standard reprints that all of the major chapters seem to be getting, things like Duty Eternal for their Dreadnoughts, and things like Veteran Intercessors, the ones that were introduced in the new version of Codex Space Marines. Like Dark Angels and Blood Angels before them though, they will be getting a bunch of new Space Wolf ones. I believe Blood and Dark Angels got something around 8 of them, so that seems very likely that we'll be seeing something similar. First up, we have an interesting and very useful one called Knowledge of the Foe, which represents your nice Space Wolf character, tucking into their fallen enemy via the process of omophagia, which is how Space Marines supposedly learn information about their enemies via processing of their genetic material. Why not? Ethics of casual cannibalism aside, this does seem to be a pretty useful stratagem, and it's interesting in that it costs 0 command points. Basically, you use this in the fight phase whenever a character is destroyed by an attack made by a Space Wolves model in your army, then you receive 1 command point. Now this one seems very likely to come up to me. If the Space Wolves army is having any success on the table, then you'd hope they'd be killing 1 or more enemy characters over the course of the game. So this is basically a source of free command points. It's interesting the way that it's a model, not a character, and there's no restriction to either of them having to be vehicles. So you could do this if your Dreadnought kills a tank commander or something like that. Not sure exactly how the Dreadnought's going to manage to eat part of the tank commander, but presumably he finds a way. It's honestly very useful, and I think it's a small but very solid buff to a Space Wolves army, making it just flat stronger than before. Next up we have another very solid one, which is Touch of the Wild, a stratagem to make your Space Wolves characters go absolutely through the roof in melee. This one is honestly just insane combined with scary Space Wolf characters. You use it in your fight phase and select a Space Wolf's character that's about to make an attack. Until the end of the phase, when resolving an attack made by that model, any unmodified hit roll of 4+ scores 1 additional hit on the targets. Now most Space Wolf characters are going to be hitting on 2s, that means 3 of every 5 of their hits are going to be a 4 or more, making this a 1 command point stratagem to give that character a flat 60% increase in its damage output. And Space Wolf characters can deal a massive amount of damage, so in terms of damage output for command points spent, this is a hilariously strong stratagem, and I could honestly see you using it every single time that a Space Wolf character made it into combat with the enemy. Doing the maths on Ragnar and his 10 attacks gets you roughly in the ballpark of 15 to 18 hits, depending on whether or not the Wolf's unique combat doctrine is active. I believe it would stack with that, by the way, so it means that every hit roll of 6 will be getting 3 hits from the character on the targets. This is also incredibly strong when combined with fighting again via Honour the Chapter, and it really dials that one up to 11. I know it costs 4 command points, but it will basically allow a fighty character to fight at over 3 times the efficiency that they would have been fighting at before. Very, very strong, and another serious boost to Space Wolf combat. Next we'll move on to look at a stratagem that was leaked on the Warhammer 40k Facebook page, and this one's for Thunderwolves and it's called Death Grip Bite. It's 1 command point, and again used in the fight phase when a Thunderwolf cavalry unit from your army is chosen to fight with. Until the end of the phase, the teeth and claws of the Thunderwolves will have a damage characteristic of 2 rather than 1. Now it's not too bad, could be particularly good against some 2 wound targets, and if you use it on a full tricked out Thunderwolf cavalry squad that's charging at full strength, then you'll be getting 18 strength 5 AP -1 damage to attacks. I'm not sure I'm quite as impressed by this one. If you do have the luxury of having a big squad like that charging, there's a good chance they're going to make a mess of whatever they charge at anyway between all of the fancy weapons that they're equipped with. And if you have a smaller squad where you don't think they're going to wipe it out, it's only going to affect a smaller amount of wolf attacks. So I think unless you're charging something like a big horde of intercessors and the damage 2 is really going to make a massive difference, this one might be a little bit more niche. So 2 absolutely amazing stratagems and one that's got some niche uses. I'll certainly be interested to see the rest. Next up we have Listeners. I presume that this book will see the Wolf Priest datasheets being updated, as has been happening with the chaplains in Blood Angels and Dark Angels, to be able to cast the Litanies of Battle. It says that the Space Wolves will be getting the standard ones available in Codex Space Marines. In particular, that +2 to charge ranges could be very handy indeed when the Space Wolves are such a melee focused army. As well as all of those though, they have the Tale of the Wolf King and the Lord of the Deeps, which is a very fun if slightly wordy name for a Listening, where the Wolf Priest inspires a nearby unit to be extra good at fighting vehicles or monsters. You basically choose 1 Space Wolf's unit within 6 inches of the Wolf Priest, and then when resolving an attack made by a melee weapon against a monster or vehicle, you add +1 to the damage characteristic of the weapon for that attack. So you could perhaps be having damage 2 chainswords, or maybe damage D3 +1 power fists or something. A very solid buff if you are taking down armoured targets, and it could be one to include in the list, somewhat reactively depending on the opponent. It'll be interesting to see if Ulrich the Slayer gets to cast more than 1 litany per turn. That could definitely dial up his worth in a Space Wolves army. Finally, to round this all out, we have some relics. I suspect that the Space Wolves will be getting access to the special issue war gear, things like the mastercrafted weapon and adamantine mantle and things. In particular, mastercrafted weapon will be just a very nice little tool that can be added to the arsenal of the Space Wolves' mighty character combat, and I'm sure we'll see play. They've also shown off 2 new relics here, one of which is Worm Splitter, a nice relic power axe with strength +1, AP -2 and damage 2 that increases up to damage 4 if they're targeting a monster or vehicle. So a pretty decent all-round weapon there, but personally this isn't really one that I'd pick up. It's not so bad against certain armoured targets that have decent invul saves and things, but say if you take it against the toughness 7 vehicle profile with toughness 7 and a 3-up armour save, in a Space Wolves army that's getting +1 to hit a lot of the time, you're actually going to be better off with a power fist and saving your relic slot for something else. You could even make that power fist a mastercrafted power fist if you wanted, which would massively put it ahead. So it's a fun idea, but the numbers just don't really add up for me for this one. The other one is a Talisman of Storms, a relic for rune priests when they're casting psychic powers. Basically, after resolving their first psychic power for the bearer in your psychic phase, roll a d6 for each enemy unit within 12 inches of the bearer, and on a 4+, that enemy suffers a mortal wound. If you are planning on using a Rune Priest to move forward aggressively and buff your other heroes, then it could well be worth it, and might add up to a few mortal wounds over the course of the game. In all honesty, I still don't think that this one's going to be played massively compared with the other relic options, just because it's a bit scattergun, random and short ranged. It's always good to have more options, but I'm hoping that there'll be some other things that are more exciting than these ones. In any case, overall I still think that this is a massive buff to the Space Wolves. In particular, getting extra command points and having ridiculously fighty characters in melee are both solid things that really put Space Wolves to the next level, and accessing combat doctrines is certainly another massive buff. I'll most certainly be covering Saga of the Beast when it comes out, which hopefully should be Saturday, so feel free to subscribe if you'd like to see a full review at a later date. Let me know down in the comments if you've spotted anything interesting that we could do with these new rules, and if there's anything that I've either underestimated or overestimated in your opinion. Finally, if you'd like to help support the channel, I do have a Patreon page. You'll find the link down in the description below. Making all of these videos does take a fair bit of time, so if you're watching a fair bit of the content, any support is much appreciated, as I'm trying to get to the point where I'm doing this as a bit more of a full-time thing rather than just in weekends and evenings, and for that matter at 4 AM in the morning like it is now, as well as helping support the creation of new videos. There are a few other bits on there, including voting on new videos to come, occasional prize draws, and early access videos each week that you get to see before anyone else. If any of that interests you, then feel free to give it a look, the link is down in the description. In any case, thank you very much for listening, and I'll hope to see you for more Space Wolves content in the near future.